On the morning of the 23rd of April, 2024, a wall of brown water moved through the streets of Dubai's financial district. Cars floated past the glass facades of banks and hedge funds. The Dubai Mall, the largest shopping center on Earth by total area, had water pouring through its entrance. Terminals at Dubai International Airport, the world's busiest by international passenger traffic, went dark for hours. Flights were canceled. Luggage piled up on soaked carpets. The images traveled around the world within minutes, and for many observers, there was something almost too symbolic about it. The city that had promised to conquer nature, momentarily conquered by rain. It was, according to the UAE's National Center of Meteorology, the heaviest rainfall the country had recorded in 75 years. In roughly 12 hours, parts of Dubai received more precipitation than they typically see in an entire year. The city's drainage infrastructure, built for a desert that averages around 100 millimeters of rain annually, simply had no answer for it. Within days, officials and commentators were already debating what the floods truly revealed: a freak meteorological event, a consequence of experimental cloud seeding operations, a symptom of climate change, or something more fundamental about a city that has always built faster than it has planned. That question, what the floods revealed, cuts to the heart of everything Dubai has become over the past 3 decades, and everything it is straining to become in the 3 decades ahead. Because Dubai is not finished. It is arguably only halfway through the most audacious urban construction project in human history, and the stakes, measured in both money and meaning, are almost incomprehensible in scale. The Emirates leadership has laid out a framework called the Dubai Economic Agenda, known publicly as D33, which commits the city to doubling its economy by 2033, from roughly $450 billion in gross domestic product to $900 billion. The broader vision attached to it speaks of making Dubai the world's best city to live and work in by the same year. Achieving that would require sustained economic growth rates that very few cities anywhere on Earth have ever maintained for a decade. It would require attracting several million more residents to a place that already hosts roughly 94% of its population as foreign nationals. It would require the infrastructure to hold all of that weight. And here is where the ambition begins to fracture against reality. For decades, the standard narrative about Dubai ran something like this: a tiny desert emirate with modest oil reserves, led by a visionary ruling family, conjured a global city out of nothing through sheer force of will and foreign investment. That narrative is not wrong, exactly, but it is incomplete in ways that matter enormously right now. The Burj Khalifa stands at 828 meters. The Palm Jumeirah is visible from space. Dubai has the world's largest gold souk, one of the world's largest ports, and a financial hub that in 2023 ranked among the top 10 globally by the Yen Global Financial Centers Index for the first time. These are real achievements. They are not imaginary. What is also real is the machinery underneath. Dubai's model has always depended on a particular configuration of inputs: cheap migrant labor with limited rights, sovereign wealth that can absorb losses private investors would not tolerate, a regulatory environment calibrated to attract capital rather than tax it, and a geopolitical position that makes it the natural hinge between Europe, South Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. Each of those inputs is under pressure in ways they have not been before simultaneously. Take the labor question first. The kafala system, which binds migrant workers to their employers in ways that human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, have described as conditions analogous to forced labor, has faced more sustained international scrutiny since FIFA awarded Qatar the 2022 World Cup, and the construction deaths associated with that project became widely reported. The UAE has made incremental reforms. Workers can now change jobs without employer permission under certain conditions, and there are mechanisms for wage protection that did not exist 20 years ago. But according to reporting by The Guardian and Human Rights Watch through 2023 and 2024, deaths among laborers on major UAE construction sites remain chronically underreported, and the fundamental power imbalance between employer and worker has not been structurally altered. The men who are currently building Dubai's next generation of skyscrapers, the 270-meter Uptown Tower, the expanded metro lines, the new districts planned under D33, are working inside a system that has changed at the edges, but not at the core. Then there is the financial architecture. Dubai's property market has been one of the world's strongest performers since 2020, with Knight Frank reporting price increases of over 40% in prime areas between 2020 and 2023. That surge was driven in part by a genuine influx of high-net-worth individuals fleeing COVID-era restrictions in Europe and North America, in part by Russian capital seeking safe harbor after Western sanctions, and in part by speculative momentum that feeds on itself in any rapidly appreciating market. The concern among analysts at institutions including Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, expressed in research notes through 2023, is that the composition of this demand is unstable. Russian buyers face ongoing pressure from sanctions enforcement. The post-COVID relocation wave has largely run its course. Interest rates globally remain elevated, which slows leveraged property investment. And Dubai has been here before. In 2009, it stood on the edge of a sovereign default, requiring a $100 billion bailout from Abu Dhabi to prevent a cascade of failures. The Palm Jumeirah lost roughly half its value. Nakheel, the developer behind it, was restructured under conditions that were, according to a 2010 report in the Financial Times, effectively a form of managed insolvency. The city recovered. It recovered spectacularly, in fact. But the recovery did not change the underlying structure. It revealed it. Dubai is, at its foundation, a leveraged bet, a bet that growth will remain rapid enough to service ambition, that new residents and new capital will keep arriving faster than costs compound. The floods of April 2024 introduced a new variable into that calculation, or rather, made an existing variable impossible to ignore. Climate projections for the Arabian Peninsula, including those published by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in its 6th assessment report, indicate that extreme heat events will become more frequent and more severe across the region throughout this century. The UAE already operates at temperatures that routinely exceed 45 degrees Celsius in summer. Wet bulb temperature thresholds, the point at which a healthy human being cannot cool themselves through sweating regardless of shade, are being approached in coastal Gulf cities with increasing regularity, according to research published in the journal Nature Climate Change. At the same time, while total annual rainfall may decrease, the pattern of that rainfall is shifting toward more intense short-duration events, which is precisely what hit Dubai in April. The economic implications of this are not abstract. Outdoor construction workers cannot work during wet bulb events. Infrastructure maintenance becomes more expensive in extreme heat. Insurance premiums for coastal property in a city built partly on reclaimed land, including the entire Palm Jumeirah archipelago, are beginning to reflect physical climate risk in ways they did not a decade ago. And the amenity proposition that Dubai sells to the global wealthy year-round sunshine, outdoor lifestyle, vibrancy has a physical ceiling that is moving closer. None of this is unique to Dubai. Miami faces rising seas. Phoenix faces heat. Jakarta has sunk so dramatically under the weight of its own groundwater extraction that Indonesia is building an entirely new capital city. But Dubai occupies a peculiar position in this global conversation because it has marketed itself so aggressively as a city beyond constraint. The pitch has always been that human ingenuity, deployed at sufficient scale and with sufficient capital, can overcome geography, history, and natural limitation. The floods did not disprove that pitch, but they complicated it in ways that are difficult to fully paper over with drainage improvement plans and government press releases. There is a counter-argument worth taking seriously, and it comes not from boosters, but from economists who study emerging market urbanization. The argument is that Dubai's structural vulnerabilities have been visible for at least 20 years, and that those who have repeatedly predicted its collapse have been consistently, sometimes embarrassingly, wrong. The 2009 crisis was real. The recovery was more real. The city's population in 2024 stands at roughly 3.5 million, nearly double what it was in 2009. Trade volumes through Jebel Ali Port grew through the pandemic. Emirates Airline returned to profitability after its worst years and has been ordering new aircraft at a rate that implies serious confidence in long-range demand. The DIFC, Dubai's financial free zone, registered a record number of new companies in 2023. When Deutsche Bank or a Singaporean family office opens an office in the DIFC, they are making a judgment about where capital flows in the coming decades, and that judgment has consistently favored Dubai over its competitors in the region. The question is not whether Dubai is failing. By almost any measure, it is not. The question is whether the version of Dubai that exists now, and especially the vastly larger version projected by D33, can be sustained through a period of compounding pressures that did not exist, or did not exist in the same configuration. When the original model was designed in the 1990s by Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum and his advisors, Sheikh Mohammed remains the dominant figure in Dubai's development story. Now, in his mid-70s, he has governed the emirate with a combination of genuine strategic vision and authoritarian control that has defined the city for 40 years. The suppression of dissent, documented by organizations including Freedom House and reinforced in international attention by cases such as that of his daughter Princess Latifa, whose attempted escape in 2018 was detailed in extensive reporting by the BBC, sits alongside the infrastructure achievements as part of the same story. The city that built the Burj Khalifa is also the city where a critical tweet can result in a decade in prison. That compression of freedom is not incidental to the model, it is partly what makes the model execute at the speed it does. The absence of planning opposition, of independent courts capable of restraining executive action, of a free press that might expose cost overruns or ecological damage, creates the conditions for rapid construction. It also creates the conditions for uncorrected error. That is perhaps the deepest vulnerability of all. Not the floods, not the property cycle, not the climate projections, though all of those are real. The deepest vulnerability is that Dubai has no reliable internal mechanism for identifying when its ambitions are outrunning its foundations. The feedback loops that exist in more open societies, investigative journalism, political opposition, independent regulatory bodies, are either absent or severely constrained. When the drainage system was insufficient, no one in the emirate was publishing reports warning about it. When the property market was overheating before 2009, the corrective signal came from global credit markets, not from within. On a still evening over the creek Indira, the oldest continuously inhabited part of Dubai, wooden dhows still load cargo under sodium lights, just as they have for over a century. The skyline behind them is impossible, a hallucination of glass and steel and ambition that climbs into the dark. It is one of the genuinely arresting urban images of the 21st century. What it means, whether it represents a new model of civilization or an extraordinarily elaborate wager that has not yet been fully called, is a question that the water in the streets of April 2024 did not answer. It only made the question harder to postpone.